The pharmacy lights flickered against the glass shelves filled with colorful boxes of medicine. Sarah stood at the counter, clutching her little boy in her arms. His forehead burned with fever, his small body trembling as he pressed against her chest. Her hands shook as she placed a handful of coins on the counter, all she had managed to gather. Tears blurred her vision. "Please," she begged softly, her voice breaking. "My son needs this medicine. This is everything I have." The pharmacist glanced down at the coins with disdain. His tone was cold, sharp, almost cruel. "This isn't enough. Come back when you can pay the full amount." Sarah's heart dropped. "Please, look at him. He's sick. He needs this now." But the man only crossed his arms, shaking his head. "Rules are rules. If you can't pay, you can't buy." Her tears fell freely now. She clutched her son tighter, his small hand gripping her blouse as he whispered weakly, "Mommy." Behind her, people in line muttered. Some rolled their eyes. One woman whispered, "Pathetic. If she can't afford medicine, maybe she shouldn't have children." Sarah's face burned with shame. She gathered her coins back with trembling fingers, her pride and desperation colliding in a storm she could no longer hide. She turned to leave, the sound of her son's weak cough echoing through the silent pharmacy. But just then, the glass door swung open. A tall figure stepped inside, dressed in a dark suit, his presence instantly commanding the room. His sharp eyes scanned the scene, narrowing on Sarah, the crying child, and the pharmacist behind the counter. The whispers stopped. The air grew tense, and no one could have imagined what the CEO would do next. The alarm buzzed before dawn, its harsh sound filling the tiny apartment. Sarah groaned softly, her body aching from another sleepless night. Beside her, little Michael, only 3 years old, whimpered in his sleep, his forehead still warm with fever. She pressed her hand gently against his skin, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here." His small chest rose and fell unevenly. Each breath rattled with a faint cough. Sarah hadn't slept properly in days. She had spent the night sitting up with him, wiping his forehead with a damp cloth, counting the minutes until the pharmacy opened. Her own body begged for rest, but her son's needs always came first. In the kitchen, she opened the nearly empty cupboard. Half a loaf of stale bread sat on the shelf, along with a single jar of peanut butter. She spread a thin layer on the bread, cutting it into small pieces for Michael. "Breakfast, baby," she whispered, kissing his hair as he struggled to sit up. He smiled faintly, his little hands clumsy, but eager to take the food. "Thank you, Mommy." Her chest ached. She forced a smile, though tears pricked her eyes. "Eat slowly, okay?" After breakfast, Sarah counted the coins she had managed to save. A few quarters, some dimes, and pennies, barely enough for bus fare, let alone medicine. She sighed, gathering them carefully into her worn purse. She dressed Michael warmly, wrapping him in a second-hand jacket 2 sizes too big. His cough echoed through the small room as she buttoned it up. "You'll be okay," she whispered again, though she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince him or herself. Outside, the cold morning air bit at her cheeks. The streets were busy, filled with people rushing to work. Sarah walked slowly, cradling Michael against her chest. Every step was heavy, but her resolve pushed her forward. She would not let him suffer without trying. They passed the bakery, the smell of fresh bread filling the air. Michael's eyes lingered on the window, where golden loaves lined the shelves. Sarah's heart twisted. She tightened her grip on him and kept walking, whispering, "One day, baby, one day." The bus ride felt endless. People stared at her tired face, her worn clothes, her sick child. Some looked away with pity, others with annoyance. Sarah kept her eyes on the window, fighting the urge to break down. At last, they arrived at the pharmacy. The bright lights and clean shelves felt like another world compared to her small apartment. She held Michael close, his weak cough echoing in the sterile air. She approached the counter, rehearsing the words in her head. "Please, my son is sick. This is all I have." Her fingers clutched the coins inside her purse as if they were treasure. Each one had been earned through sacrifice, skipped meals, extra shifts, endless exhaustion. Michael tugged at her sleeve, his eyes glassy. "Mommy, will I get better?" Her throat tightened. She knelt to his level, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "Yes, sweetheart. Mommy's going to make sure you get better." She stood, drawing a deep breath. Her legs felt like lead, but she walked to the counter anyway. What she didn't know was that this moment, her tears, her trembling hands, her desperate plea, would be the spark that changed everything. Because while she thought she was invisible, someone was watching. And soon, Sarah's silent struggles would become a story the whole city would never forget. Sarah believed she was just another desperate mother in the crowd. But fate had already set the stage for what was about to happen inside that pharmacy. The bright lights of the pharmacy stung Sarah's tired eyes as she stepped inside, holding Michael tightly against her chest. His forehead burned against her skin, his weak cough echoing through the quiet aisles. She walked past shelves stacked high with medicine she could barely afford to look at, let alone buy. At the counter, a middle-aged pharmacist glanced up, adjusting his glasses. His expression was flat, already impatient. Next, Sarah approached slowly, her hands trembling as she set Michael down on the counter's edge. She reached into her worn purse and carefully pulled out the coin she had gathered. Her entire hope laid bare in a small pile of change. Her voice shook, but her words carried desperate determination. "Please, my son has a fever. He needs this medicine. This is all I have." The pharmacist looked at the coins, then at her. His lips curled slightly in disdain. "This isn't enough. The medicine costs $20. You have, what, maybe 5? Sarah swallowed hard, her eyes stinging with tears. "I can pay the rest later, I promise. He's very sick. Please just give me the medicine now. I'll work and come back with the money." The man shook his head firmly. "That's not how it works. Rules are rules. No payment, no medicine." Her chest tightened. She leaned forward, lowering her voice, pleading. "Please look at him. He can't stop coughing. His fever hasn't gone down in days. If I wait, it might be too late." Michael whimpered softly, gripping her blouse with his tiny fingers. "Mommy," but the pharmacist only sighed, annoyed. "Ma'am, you're holding up the line. If you can't pay, step aside." Behind her, people shifted impatiently. A man muttered, "Some people always want charity." Another whispered loudly enough to be heard, "If she can't afford medicine, why does she even have a child?" Sarah's cheeks burned with humiliation. Tears blurred her vision as she tried to gather the coins back into her purse. Each clink of the metal against the counter echoed like a cruel reminder of her helplessness. Michael's eyes, glassy and feverish, searched her face. "Are we going home, Mommy? Without medicine?" Her heart shattered. She knelt beside him, brushing his damp hair back with trembling fingers. "No, sweetheart. Mommy's trying. Mommy's not giving up." She turned back to the pharmacist, her voice breaking now, desperation spilling out with every word. "Please, I'm begging you. I don't care if you trust me or not. I'll clean your floors. I'll work here if I have to. Just don't send me away with empty hands." The pharmacist crossed his arms, his tone sharp and final. "I said no. Stop wasting everyone's time." The weight of his words crushed her. Sarah stood frozen, coins slipping through her trembling hands, tears falling down her cheeks unchecked. Around her, the whispers grew louder, crueler. People shook their heads, rolled their eyes, turned away as if her pain were nothing but an inconvenience. Michael coughed violently, his small body shuddering. Sarah pulled him close, her tears dripping onto his hair. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, though her own voice was broken. "Mommy's here." But inside, her spirit was collapsing. She had faced hunger, loneliness, and exhaustion, but nothing compared to the shame of being denied the one thing her child needed most. With shaking legs, she turned to leave, clutching Michael tightly in her arms. Her vision blurred, her chest heavy with despair. The world around her seemed colder, harsher, more unforgiving than ever before. And then, the sound of the pharmacy door opening broke the silence. A tall figure stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking against the floor, his dark suit perfectly pressed. His presence alone shifted the air in the room, drawing every eye toward him. His sharp gaze scanned the scene, the trembling mother, the sick child in her arms, the coins scattered on the counter, and the pharmacist standing cold and unmoved. The whispers stopped. The room froze. And in that moment, Sarah had no idea that her humiliation had just been witnessed by someone who had the power to turn the entire scene upside down. But no one in that pharmacy could have imagined what the man in the dark suit was about to do next. The sound of the glass door closing echoed through the pharmacy. Sarah froze, her tears still streaking down her cheeks as she clutched Michael tightly. The room grew strangely silent, all eyes shifting toward the tall man who had just stepped inside. He was striking, dressed in a sharp dark suit, his polished shoes reflecting the bright lights of the store. His presence radiated authority, the kind that made people straighten their backs and lower their voices without even knowing why. The pharmacist adjusted his glasses nervously, recognizing him instantly. Richard Cole, the CEO whose name carried weight across the entire city. But Sarah didn't look up. She kept her gaze fixed on the floor, humiliated, wishing she could disappear. Richard's eyes swept across the scene. He saw the coins scattered on the counter, the pharmacist's cold expression, the exhausted mother holding a trembling child. His jaw tightened. He had walked into countless meetings where millions were at stake, but never had a room felt so heavy. Something about the sight pierced through the armor he had built around his heart. Michael coughed weakly, his little face pale against Sarah's chest. Richard's gaze softened for a moment. He took a step forward, his deep voice cutting through the silence. "What's going on here?" The pharmacist cleared his throat quickly, standing straighter. "Mr. Cole, sir, it's nothing. Just company policy. She doesn't have enough money for the medicine." Richard's sharp eyes turned back to Sarah. She finally looked up, her tear-streaked face trembling with shame. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For a moment, Richard said nothing. He studied her, the child, the coins, the pharmacist. Every detail burned into his mind. Inside, a storm brewed. He thought of his own past, of mistakes and regrets, of choices made in boardrooms where profit mattered more than people. And here, right in front of him, was a living reminder of the cost of such indifference. He stepped closer to the counter, his presence towering. "She doesn't have enough money, and your answer is to let a sick child go without medicine?" The pharmacist swallowed hard. "Sir, I was just following the rules. If we bend them once, everyone will expect the same." Richard's voice hardened. "Rules exist to protect people, not to abandon them." Sarah's heart pounded. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. A stranger, and not just any stranger, but a man whose suit alone cost more than she made in a year, was speaking for her. Her lips trembled. I only had a few coins. I didn't know what else to do." Michael whimpered, burying his face in her shoulder. Richard's gaze softened again, just for an instant, as he looked at the boy. Then he turned back to the pharmacist, his tone sharp as steel. "And what if this child doesn't survive the night? Will you tell yourself you were just following rules then?" The room was silent. Customers who had once whispered and mocked now watched with wide eyes, waiting. The pharmacist fidgeted, his arrogance faltering. "Mr. Cole, Enough," Richard interrupted, his voice low but commanding. "I've heard enough." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She clutched Michael tighter, her tears flowing freely again, but this time mixed with something new, the faintest glimmer of hope. The pharmacist's face paled. He knew what was coming, but he dared not speak. Richard's eyes narrowed. His next words carried the weight of final judgment. Sarah stared at him, overwhelmed, unable to process what was unfolding. She had walked into the pharmacy expecting humiliation, expecting rejection, and instead, something entirely different was taking shape before her. Michael stirred in her arms, whispering weakly, "Mommy, who is he?" Sarah kissed his hair, her voice shaking. "Someone we never expected." No one in that pharmacy could have imagined the storm Richard was about to unleash, and his next words would leave everyone in shock. The air inside the pharmacy grew heavier, every eye fixed on the man in the dark suit. Richard Cole stepped closer to the counter, his gaze locked on the pharmacist who stood rigid behind it. The silence was suffocating, broken only by Michael's weak cough in Sarah's arms. Richard's voice was calm, but sharp enough to cut through stone. "So let me understand. A sick child is standing here in front of you, and you refuse to help because the mother had only coins." The pharmacist's hands twitched nervously, but he forced a thin smile. "Mr. Cole, I was simply following store policy. Medicine must be paid in full. If we allow exceptions..." Richard's eyes narrowed, his tone dropping an octave. "Exceptions? This isn't a discount on toothpaste. This is a child's life." The pharmacist swallowed hard. He straightened his shoulders, clinging to his rules. "With respect, sir, if I gave away medicine every time someone cried at my counter, this business would collapse." A gasp rose from the small crowd. Sarah's face burned with humiliation, her tears spilling again. She whispered desperately, "Please, he doesn't understand. My son." But Richard lifted a hand gently, signaling her to stop. His eyes never left the pharmacist. "Collapse?" he repeated, his voice icy. "This pharmacy sells thousands of prescriptions a week. You're telling me one bottle of fever medicine would bankrupt you?" The man faltered, his arrogance beginning to crack under the weight of Richard's authority. "Still," he muttered, It's the principle. If we give in once, everyone expects it. Richard leaned forward slightly, his presence overwhelming. Principles, he said slowly, are supposed to serve humanity, not crush it. The pharmacist's face flushed red. Sir, I don't make the rules. I only enforce them. Enforce? Richard's voice boomed now, resonating through the pharmacy. What you call enforcing is nothing more than cruelty disguised as policy. The crowd shifted, murmurs of agreement rising. People who had once whispered against Sarah now looked at the pharmacist with disdain. Sarah held Michael tighter, her heart pounding. For the first time that day, she felt the weight lifting slightly. Someone was standing for her. The pharmacist, flustered, tried to regain control. Mr. Cole, with all due respect, you are not in charge here. I am responsible for this counter, and my decision stands. Richard's jaw tightened. The air turned electric. He took one step closer, his towering frame casting a shadow across the counter. Not in charge? His voice dropped, low and dangerous. You may control this counter, but don't forget who owns this chain. The pharmacist froze, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. Customers gasped, eyes widening. Sarah blinked, stunned. She had no idea who this man truly was. But from the way the pharmacist's face drained of color, it was clear. Richard wasn't just any customer. He was the one with ultimate authority. Richard leaned in, his voice steady but lethal. You had the chance to show compassion. You chose arrogance. You looked into the eyes of a sick child and decided rules mattered more than his life. The pharmacist stammered. I was only proving you are unfit for this job, Richard interrupted, his tone final. Gasps echoed once more. Sarah's breath caught. Michael, too young to understand, clutched her tightly, sensing the tension. The crowd now murmured loudly, anger shifting away from Sarah and toward the man behind the counter. Richard straightened, his voice carrying through the entire pharmacy. The world doesn't need more people who hide behind rules. It needs people willing to stand for what's right. The pharmacist's hands trembled. His lips quivered as he tried to speak, but no words came out. Sarah, overwhelmed, whispered softly, "Is this really happening?" She kissed Michael's damp hair, her tears of shame slowly turning into tears of relief. Richard took a deep breath, his eyes piercing the man before him. "I've made my decision," he said, his words echoing like a gavel striking in court. The pharmacist froze, his fate hanging in the balance. The crowd leaned in, waiting. Sarah's heart raced, and with his next words, Richard would shock everyone in the room. What Richard declared next would not only change Sarah's life, but would shake the walls of that pharmacy forever. The pharmacy was silent, the air heavy with anticipation. The pharmacist stood stiffly behind the counter, his face pale as Richard's words lingered in the air. Sarah clutched Michael tighter, her tears drying slowly as hope began to flicker inside her chest. Richard's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "I said enough. I've seen enough." The pharmacist's lips trembled. "Mr. Cole, please. I was only—" Richard lifted a hand, silencing him instantly. His eyes were sharp, cold, carrying the weight of authority. "You humiliated a mother. You denied a child the medicine he needed, and you dared to justify it with rules." The crowd murmured, heads turning, whispers rising. People were no longer indifferent. Their faces now showed outrage at the man behind the counter. Richard's jaw tightened. "This pharmacy, this entire chain, runs under my name, and as of this moment," he paused, his gaze piercing, "you are finished." Gasps filled the room. The pharmacist's face drained of all color. What? You can't just—" "I just did," Richard interrupted, his tone final. "You are fired. Effective immediately. Hand over your keys, your badge, and leave. Right now." The man stammered, his voice cracking. "Please, sir. I've worked here for years. I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean?" Richard's voice rose with righteous anger. "You didn't mean to turn away a mother with nothing but coins? You didn't mean to let a child suffer while you hid behind policies? No. You meant every cold word you spoke, and now you will face the consequences." The crowd erupted into murmurs of approval. Some even clapped softly. A woman in line whispered, "Finally." Someone stood up to him. Another nodded. He was always heartless. This is justice. Sarah stood frozen, her eyes wide in disbelief. She had expected humiliation, rejection, maybe even cruelty. But this was beyond anything she could have imagined. She held Michael closer, whispering softly, It's okay, baby. It's okay. Her tears returned, but this time they were tears of relief. The pharmacist, defeated, fumbled with his badge and keys. He slammed them on the counter, glaring at Richard with a mix of fear and bitterness. "You'll regret this," he muttered. Richard didn't flinch. "The only regret here is yours. Get out." With that, the man stormed toward the door, his footsteps heavy and clumsy. The glass door slammed behind him, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Richard turned back to Sarah. His voice softened, though his eyes still burned with determination. "Ma'am, your son will have his medicine. Today, and any day he needs it." Sarah's lips parted, her voice trembling. I don't understand. Why would you—" Richard cut her off gently. "Because no child should suffer because of money, and no mother should be humiliated for loving her child." Her knees nearly gave out. She steadied herself against the counter, clutching Michael tightly as tears spilled down her face. Thank you, she whispered over and over. The pharmacist's assistant, still behind the counter, scrambled to prepare the medicine. Her hands shook as she placed the bottle on the counter in front of Sarah. "Here," she said softly. "No charge." Sarah hesitated, staring at the medicine as if it were a miracle. Slowly, she reached out, her trembling fingers curling around the bottle. Her tears dripped onto the label as she whispered, "Finally." Michael coughed weakly, then nestled into her shoulder, his tiny voice murmuring, "Mommy, medicine?" Sarah kissed his hair. "Yes, baby. You'll get better now." Richard glanced around the pharmacy, his eyes meeting those of the onlookers. His tone was calm, but firm. "Let this be a lesson. Compassion is not weakness. It is strength, and anyone who forgets that has no place serving others." The customers nodded, some even applauding louder now. The tension in the air shifted, no longer heavy with cruelty, but filled with relief and respect. Sarah turned back to Richard, her voice breaking with gratitude. "You don't know what this means to me, to us." Richard's expression softened. For a moment, the hard edges of his face melted, revealing something rare, genuine compassion. He gave a small nod. "Take care of him. That's all that matters." As Sarah held the medicine close, her heart pounded with a mix of disbelief and gratitude. She had walked into the pharmacy with nothing but coins and hope. She was leaving with more than just medicine. She was leaving with her dignity restored. And though she didn't know it yet, this moment would be remembered not just by her, but by everyone who had witnessed the scene. For Sarah, the medicine meant survival. But the true gift was the dignity she thought she had lost forever. The glass door slammed shut behind the pharmacist, leaving the pharmacy in stunned silence. His absence was louder than his presence had ever been. For years, he had stood behind that counter, unmoved by countless faces in need. But in a single moment, his arrogance had been stripped away, and everyone had seen it. Sarah stood frozen, clutching Michael tightly against her chest. Her tears blurred the scene in front of her. In her hands, the small bottle of medicine felt impossibly heavy, as though it contained not just the cure for her son's fever, but the answer to every desperate prayer she had whispered in the dark. She pressed it close to her heart, whispering, "We did it, baby. You're going to be okay." Michael stirred weakly, lifting his fevered face to look at her. His lips curled into the faintest smile. "Medicine?" Her tears spilled over again. "Yes, sweetheart. Medicine. You'll get better now." She kissed his damp hair, breathing in the fragile warmth of his small body. Around them, the mood shifted. The same customers who had whispered cruel words earlier now stood in silence, many with shame painted across their faces. A woman who had rolled her eyes before stepped forward, her voice soft. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have judged you." Sarah's throat tightened. She nodded faintly, unable to form words. An older man clapped slowly, his rough hands echoing in the room. Soon others joined in, the quiet applause growing into a wave of approval. It wasn't just for Sarah. It was for justice, for a moment when power had chosen compassion over cruelty. Sarah's cheeks flushed. She wasn't used to applause. For so long she had been invisible, dismissed, overlooked. And now, she was seen. Richard stood tall, his expression unreadable, but his eyes softened as they fell on Sarah and her son. He didn't smile, didn't bask in the praise. He simply gave a small nod as if to say, "This is how it should always be." Sarah's lips parted, her voice trembling. "I don't even know how to thank you." Richard's tone was steady, quiet, but powerful. "No thanks needed. Just take care of him. That's all that matters." Her chest ached at the simplicity of his words. For years, life had been nothing but battles, proving herself, surviving, enduring humiliation. And in this moment, someone powerful had reminded her that her fight wasn't in vain. The pharmacy assistant, still shaken by what had happened, leaned over the counter. Her voice was gentle, almost guilty. "If you ever need anything else, come to me. I'll help." Sarah blinked, stunned. Kindness, where there had only been coldness before. She nodded, whispering, "Thank you." With Michael nestled against her, Sarah turned toward the door, the bottle of medicine clutched in her hand, the sound of applause fading behind her. She stepped out into the cold evening air. The sky above was streaked with fading light, a quiet reminder that even after the darkest day, there could still be warmth. She paused on the sidewalk, pressing her lips to Michael's forehead. "You're safe now, baby. You'll get better." His tiny voice, weak but hopeful, whispered, "Because of you, Mommy." Her tears flowed freely then, not from shame, but from pride. Inside, Richard remained by the counter for a moment, watching through the glass as Sarah disappeared into the night with her son. He felt the weight of what had just happened settle deep in his chest. He hadn't planned to interfere. He had simply come in for routine business. But life had a way of reminding him that true power wasn't in contracts or money. It was in moments like this. He adjusted his tie, his face composed once again. To the watching crowd, he spoke firmly. "Compassion is not optional. It is essential. Remember that." Then, without waiting for applause or recognition, he turned and walked out, the click of his polished shoes fading into the night. Sarah walked the long road back to her small apartment, every step lighter than it had been that morning. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. She felt that maybe, just maybe, the world hadn't forgotten her completely. And as she held the medicine close, she knew one thing for certain. The love she carried for her son was stronger than the cruelty of strangers, stronger than the weight of poverty, and strong enough to keep moving forward, no matter what. Sarah had the medicine, but more than that, she carried home something she thought she had lost forever, her dignity. The night was cold. As Sarah walked the long road back to her apartment, clutching Michael close against her chest. In her hand, the small bottle of medicine gleamed under the dim streetlights. It was such a simple object, and yet to her it felt like a treasure, proof that her son would finally find relief, proof that her fight had not been in vain. Michael's head rested heavily on her shoulder, his small body still warm with fever, but his breathing softer now. His tiny voice whispered, "Mommy, we got it?" She kissed his hair, her tears spilling again. "Yes, sweetheart, we got it. You're going to feel better soon." When they finally reached the apartment, Sarah wasted no time. She set Michael gently on the worn couch, carefully measuring the medicine with shaking hands. She held the spoon to his lips, whispering, "Slowly, baby." Michael swallowed weakly, then let out a soft sigh, his eyelids heavy. Sarah brushed his hair back, watching his small chest rise and fall. The cough would ease. The fever would break. He would be safe. She leaned back, exhausted, pressing a hand against her mouth as tears of relief flowed freely. For the first time in days, she could breathe. Sarah sat in the quiet room, her eyes drifting to the medicine bottle on the table. She thought of the humiliation she had endured, the cruel words of strangers, the coldness of the pharmacist. For so long, she had carried the weight of invisibility, convinced no one cared, that her struggles were hers to bear alone. But tonight had been different. Tonight, someone had stood up for her. She thought of the tall man in the dark suit, the authority in his voice, the fire in his eyes as he defended her and Michael. She didn't even know his name, yet he had given her something she thought she had lost forever, her dignity. Across the city, in a towering penthouse bathed in golden light, Richard Cole stood by the window, a glass of water in his hand. He looked out at the skyline, his reflection staring back at him. He didn't seek recognition for what he had done. He didn't need applause or gratitude. For him, the moment had been simple. He had seen cruelty, and he had stopped it. But deep down, he knew it meant more than that. In Sarah's trembling hands, in Michael's weak cough, he had been reminded of something he had long forgotten, that real power is not in wealth, but in compassion. He whispered into the empty room, "Sometimes the smallest battles are the most important." Back in her apartment, Sarah lay beside Michael as he drifted into sleep. She held his tiny hand in hers, her thumb brushing over his soft skin. Her heart was heavy, but stronger than ever. She had survived another storm. She thought of all the nights she had cried silently, of all the doors that had closed in her face, of every cruel word whispered behind her back. And yet here she was, still standing, still fighting, still loving with everything she had. She pressed her lips to Michael's forehead, whispering, "As long as I have you, I'll never give up. We'll always make it through. Just you and me." Michael stirred in his sleep, murmuring softly, "Best mommy." Sarah's tears returned, but they were no longer bitter. They were filled with pride, with hope, with love so deep it could never be broken. The world outside remained harsh, filled with judgment and indifference, but inside that small apartment, warmth bloomed. A mother's love had once again proved stronger than poverty, stronger than cruelty, stronger than despair. And though Sarah didn't know it, her story had already touched the lives of everyone who had witnessed it. The image of a mother crying for her child, and the justice that followed, would not be forgotten. True strength isn't found in riches or power. It's found in the heart of a mother who refuses to give up, no matter how impossible the odds. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more stories of courage and hope.